welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're doing well. Welcome to another video and welcome to another wrap-up video. This is coming to you guys in a very different location. If you guys hear any noises and stuff, please bear with me. It is the middle of the day. We are at a resort and people are hanging around, but also there's nature outside and it's much better lighting out here than it is out there. So I figured I would come out here and film this wrap-up for you guys. I'm going to be talking over all the books that I read in July. July was actually a really good reading month for me, aside from the fact that I just didn't get everything done that I would have wanted, but I still read a ton of books, so I figured I would chat about those with you guys and you know, tell you guys my thoughts. I don't have any of the books with me, so I'll be putting all the books up on the screen for you guys to check out. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my stats, and then we'll jump into my thoughts on all the books that I read this month. So for the month of July, I read a total of 17 books, so not bad at all. It was a total of 5,865 pages, which that's pretty average for me on a regular reading month, so I wasn't too upset about that at all. That averages out to about 189 pages per day and about 345 pages per book if you average it all out. And that actually came out to 178 hours of audiobook listening, which every time I think about that stat, it blows my mind every single time. And as for my format of reading, it was 14 mixed media books, 2 audiobooks, and 1 physical book. I had an average star rating of a 4.13, which again is pretty average. I tend to rate most of my books within a 4-star. I have very few 3 stars this month, and some 5 stars as well. So for the star rating breakdown, I had 5 5-stars, 8 4-stars, 3 3-stars, no 2 stars, no 1 star, and I had 1 book that I didn't rate because I DNF'd it. As for my genres, I read 9 romances, 2 fantasies, 2 contemporaries, 2 thrillers, 1 graphic novel, and 1 nonfiction. I read 8 adult books, 5 young adult books, and 4 new adult books. As for my representation in the books this time around, I had 2 books with illness rep, 5 books with mental health rep, 3 books with disability rep, which means that 7 of the books that I read had no representation in them at all. Only 2 of the books that I read this month were written by POC authors, which means that 15 were not, and 4 books had POC characters and 13 did not. And then as for the LGBTQI+ breakdown, we have 4 books where the main character was part of the community, 1 book where it was present in a side character, and 12 books with no LGBTQI+ rep. As for that breakdown, I had 1 book with lesbian representation, 2 books with bisexual representation, 1 book with gay representation, and 1 book that was non-identified. I read 14 books written by women, 1 book written by a man, and 2 books written by multiple authors. I read 8 standalones, 9 books in a series, and I finished 4 series this month. And all of the books that I read this month, I read for the first time. As for my publication years, I read 2 books written in 2021, 4 books written in 2020, 3 books written in 2019, 2 books written in 2018, 2 books written in 2017, 2 books written in 2016, 1 book written in 2012, and 1 book written in 2010. And lastly, for my color breakdowns, I read 7 white books, 3 blue books, 2 pink books, 1 black book, 1 green book, 1 purple book, 1 red book, and 1 gray book. That is all of my stats for the books that I read. I will talk about my favorite book at the end of this video, but let's go ahead and get into the very first book that I read in the month of July. The first book that I actually finished in July was one that I talked about in my June wrap-up, which was Moxie. This was the last book in the Rock Hard Beautiful series. I don't remember the author of the book, though of course I will put it up on the screen for you guys. This was a reverse harem musical rock star book that followed, oh my god, it's been so long since I've read this, but it follows a girl who had some really bad luck. Her father just passed away, and she ends up at a concert where she runs into the players or the people that are in this band, and she ends up on tour with them, and it's a reverse harem book with 5 guys, 1 girl. It was a very steamy book indeed. I talked more about it in my last wrap-up. I thought that the books were good. I gave them all 4 stars. They were a fun time, a wild ride. Reverse harems are one of my favorite romance tropes to read, and so I really enjoyed my experience with that one. I will definitely say this book series has a ton of trigger warnings for sexual assault, drug addiction, loss of a parent, excess drinking, like lots of stuff. So mental health, depression, so just go into it with some knowledge of those trigger warnings, but overall I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was really well done. I liked the writing, I liked the characters. All of these characters had some really awesome story arcs, and they had a lot of growth, which was really fun to watch these characters kind of transform into the people that they were at the end of the books, and I really enjoyed it. Definitely recommend if you're looking for a good reverse harem series. And then the next book that I read was Credence by Penelope Douglas, and I will say that this one was probably my biggest disappointment of this group. Well, one of my biggest disappointments of this group. I have read now 4 Penelope Douglas books. I have enjoyed pretty much all of them, and when I say the rating of this book, you'll be surprised because I gave it a 4-star. But I think realistically this was more like a 3.5 and it got bumped up to a 4. It is literally the last point that you can have before you hit a 3-star, and I just had a little bit of issues with the way that this book was put together. Again, this is a book that has a ton of trigger warnings. This follows a girl named Tyrion, I believe, whose parents die at the beginning of the book under interesting circumstances, and because she's not 18 quite yet, her trust and all of her money goes to her last known family member, which is actually her step-uncle. He invites her to go and live with him in this very secluded part of the forest in a very like small town, and she ends up having a relationship with not only the step-uncle but also the 2 step-cousins. It's a very interesting novel, but I think the problem wasn't with the taboo relationship, it was with the means of which Penelope Douglas got there. There was some very interesting relationship dynamics I didn't really care for. There was some really big issues with consent in this book, and it just wasn't something that I quite felt good about after reading it. I think the storyline was good. I think the pacing was off a bit, and it could have been a bit better in regards to the pacing of the book. But I liked the characters and I liked the ending of the story. I just didn't care for the way of which we got there. So it was more of a 3.5 for me. There was definitely some issues, but it ended up being bumped up to a 4 at the very end. Up next, we have My Dark Vanessa, and this is actually the book that I DNF'd. This one follows Vanessa, who had a relationship with her teacher in high school when she was 15, and it's following that timeline as well as the timeline when she's now in her 30s, and she has very fond memories of this relationship that she had with her teacher. However, she is being forced to question that when some other people are stepping forward about this relationship that they had with the same exact teacher and whether or not it was inappropriate. The problem that I have with this book, it was just too hard for me to read. The subject matter was just a little bit too uncomfortable and a bit too triggering for me to continue with, unfortunately, so I had to let this one go. I did get about 140 pages into it, and it just felt very icky. I spent a lot of the time thinking, like, I don't think I can continue this. This is really hard for me to read, and so I ended up putting it down. It really sucks because this was on my 5-star prediction list. This is a book that I really, really wanted to love. It just wasn't something that quite connected with me in a way that made it feel fulfilling enough to get to the end. So unfortunately, I did not finish that one. Up next, we have From Lukov with Love by Marina Zapata, I think. I think I might have her first name wrong, but this was a figure skating hate to love romance, which I really, really enjoyed. It was definitely very steamy and it was very, very cute. Maria Zapata definitely takes her time with her romances. They're very drawn out. There's a lot of angst and slow burn, which I really enjoyed. This follows, I'm not gonna remember the girl's name, but it follows the girl figure skater after she's had a really hard and tough time in her figure skating career, and it seems like it's about to come to an end after her partner has left her and she no longer has a figure skating partner. She skates in pairs, and when Lukov, who for the most part is this girl's sworn enemy, she's hated him since the beginning of her figure skating career, his partner, and is no longer a part of the figure skating scene, and so they decide to partner up for one season, and they end up falling in love in that time. And it was a very beautiful, well-written romance story with some steam and some angst, and definitely a really good slow burn. It has one of my favorite tropes, which is the nursing back to health trope, and it was just such a cute book. I really liked how much time was spent on making these characters super well developed and have a lot of depth behind their characters as a whole, and seeing them come together and get past their issues with each other, but also have some really nice, snarky, hate to love time in there as well, was just really well done. I really enjoyed it. It was such a cute novel altogether, and I definitely have some more of this author's books on my Kindle, so I will definitely be reading some more of her work because I really, really enjoyed it. I was actually recommended this particular author from a customer of mine, and she really enjoys her work, and so I was really excited to get around to reading that book. I ended up giving it a 5-star. It was really, really well done. If you're looking for a nice, steamy, figure skating romance, this is definitely one that I recommend. Up next, I read Instant Karma by Marissa Meyer. As you guys know, Marissa Meyer is one of my favorite authors. She just has a way of writing books that is just so much fun and easy and lighthearted and very easy to digest. And I actually read this one as a Mike pick for my TBR bingo, and he loves Marissa Meyer just as much as I do, and he really recommended that I read this book. This one follows Prudence and Quint, and is another like dislike to love type of story. Quint and Prudence are, I believe, biology partners, and they have this big project they have to do, and they end up getting a lower grade on it than Prudence would have liked. And so she's trying to convince Quint to redo the project with her. But during that time, she also has the ability, she gets into a bit of an accident. She has the ability to enact instant karma on people. So it has a little bit of a magical realism twist to this, which I thought was very interesting. But in order to redo the project, she decides to volunteer at Quint's family's like animal rescue center, and from there they create a really wonderful relationship. It is definitely a lot of back and forth snarkiness. They are definitely a couple that likes to push each other's buttons, but they learn a lot about each other. And I think the only problem that I had with this novel is the main character was a little bit immature, and she was expecting so much from people around her, but not taking responsibility for the things in her own life, and that was really frustrating to watch. And the pacing of this book was very interesting. I felt like I was reading it forever, even though it was not an overly long book, so it just felt like I was reading it for so long. I gave this book a 4-star. I really enjoyed it. I definitely think that it was a really fun YA read. Definitely something that I would recommend if you're looking for a YA romance that has a little bit more quirky, fun, magical realism aspects to it. It was definitely something that I really enjoyed. It just wasn't my favorite from Marissa Meyer. Up next, we have One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, and this is another book that I really enjoyed. I gave this book a 4-star. It wasn't quite the top tier that One Last Stop was. I'm sorry, Red, White, and Royal Blue was for me, unfortunately. For me, I felt like One Last Stop was missing the humor and the wittiness that Red, White, and Royal Blue had. That really made it so stand out for me. This one follows, I'm not going to remember their names, but it's a female-female sapphic romance with these two girls that meet on a subway under interesting circumstances, and the main character ends up falling for Jane. Jane is her name. She ends up falling for Jane that she met on the subway, but then she finds out that Jane is a very interesting person with a very interesting predicament, and that is because Jane is actually stuck in time from the 70s, and they spend the next several months trying to figure out how she got stuck, how to get her back, and to jumpstart her memories, but in that time they also fall in love. And it was a very cute book, I will say that definitely. I think that we spent a little bit more time trying to solve this mystery of what happened to Jane and how she got here than actually the falling in love part, which is what I was going into this book looking for. And so it fell a little bit flat for me, and again, it didn't have the same humor and wit that her first book did, and so it kind of just like skated under the mark there for me. I wanted a lot more from this book than what I got, but I still really enjoyed it. I thought that the romance was really cute. I really liked the side characters. The side characters in here were so funny and so well developed. I just feel like the actual relationship kind of fell flat. So overall, really enjoyed it. Definitely recommend Casey McQuiston as an author. This just wasn't my favorite one of the two, but definitely still liked it quite a bit. Up next, we have Saga Volume 3. I read this one, and I'm honestly not going to talk about this too much. It's a graphic novel series that I really enjoy. This is a Romeo and Juliet sci-fi graphic novel retelling with two people that are on opposing sides of the war that fall in love and have a baby, and the graphic novel story is told from the little girl's perspective. It's a really cute graphic novel that has a lot of interesting dynamics to it. It is very adult, it is very sexualized, it is very graphic in regards to violence and stuff like that, but overall, the storyline is really fun, really quick, fast-paced, just a really good thing to read when you need a little bit of a break between whatever you're reading. I really enjoyed the series. I ended up giving this volume a 5-star, which is pretty on track with all the rest of them. I'm really excited to continue on with the series. As of right now, I only own the 4th one as of right now, so I do need to buy the rest of my collection of that and get around to reading that, but really enjoyed it and definitely recommend it if you haven't picked up the series already. Up next is another disappointing book for me, unfortunately, and that is Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Nan. This is the second book in, I believe it was supposed to be a duology and is now a trilogy. That is the Girls of Paper and Fire series. This one follows Lei and Ren, who are paper girls who are pretty much the lowest of the low when it comes to the castes of the hierarchy in this society. And in the first book, they are taken from their homes to the kingdom to become concubines for the king, which is basically like their sex slave, the king's sex slave, and the two girls end up falling in love while they're there, which is absolutely forbidden. And it is a very interesting book with a very interesting magic system, and I really like the world building of this novel. These two novels, they have a lot of really intricate world building, a lot of politics and dynamics that is very intriguing and definitely keeps you engaged in the story. However, I felt like because this book was supposed to be a duology, it definitely showed. This book definitely suffers from middle book syndrome. I think there was supposed to be a direction of this book and it kind of fell flat because now you're trying to stretch out the information that was in the second book to give you a third book, which I just didn't think worked very well for me. There was also some character arcs in this book that I just didn't love, especially when you're set up to absolutely love and adore these characters, and when you go around and change their whole character dynamic, it's just not a fun thing to read and follow through. I am very intrigued for the third book. It definitely left off on quite a big cliffhanger, so it's definitely something that I am intrigued enough to read the third and final book in the series. I just wish that there was a little bit more like grit to the story that made it more interesting to read a 300-page book, that didn't feel like it dragged on too much in certain sections and just fell flat in others, unfortunately. I will say that I do like how dark and gritty this author is willing to get with her books, and I think that's very admirable because I know a lot of YA books aren't willing to get that dark and gritty, which is something that I really enjoy reading in YA fantasies. It just wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. It missed the mark a little bit, unfortunately, but I still would definitely read the third book. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I gave that book a 3-star. Up next is another 5-star book that I really enjoyed, and that is The Serpent King by Jeff Settner. This was a really emotionally draining book, but it was just so beautifully well done and so just amazing. This book follows Dill, Travis, and Lydia, who are best friends in this very interesting, very conservative, small-minded town. They are very much a very religious Bible Belt town, and you follow Dill, whose father has a very weathered past, and it's kind of haunting Dill and continues to follow him around in his present day situation. And then you have Travis, who comes from a very difficult home life, unfortunately, and he's very much a nerd, gamer, loves to read fantasy books, but he's very much alone, and they only have each other, these three friends. And then Lydia, who is very much different from Dill and Travis, and she has big plans, she has a big future, she's ready to go and get out of the small town that she lives in and just have something better for her life. And you follow these three friends who, it's really about friendship and learning to say goodbye to the things that you thought you were going to have in your life, and taking the small things in your life for granted and learning to cope with loss and grief and the future. So it is a really beautiful book. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil anything, but this is definitely a sad one. If you're ready for a good cry, I would 100% recommend it. It has beautiful writing. The character arcs in here are really well done. I will definitely say that it's a very frustrating book to read because the parents, the adults in this book, are so freaking frustrating, but overall it was a wonderful novel and I would 100% recommend it. There was also a live show that we did because this was one of the group books for the Summertime Reads Readathon. So if you want to hear more thoughts on that from the two other co-hosts as well as a special guest and the author of the book, I will leave that in the description box below. That was on Melanie's channel, Completely Melanie, and that was like a few weeks ago. So if you want to go rewatch the stream, I would highly recommend. It was a very good time. So the next book that I have is 5 Total Strangers. This is by, I can't remember the author of this book, but another book that I didn't love. I think I ended up giving this one a 3-star. It was okay. It was very predictable. It follows a girl who is trying to come home from wherever she's traveling from to get home for the holidays, but she's stuck in a snowstorm and she decides to hitch a ride with 4 other strangers to get back to where she's planning on going. However, during that time, things in the car start going missing, some weird things start happening. It's a thriller. I just didn't find it super, like, next level. I didn't find it super fun, really. It was kind of like an interesting book to read, and I was intrigued to get to the end because I wanted to see if I was right, but I called who the bad guy was probably in chapter 2, and I wasn't really overly impressed by the book, unfortunately, so I did end up giving this one a 3-star. I think that it definitely was a quick read if you're looking for a good, fast thriller, but it just wasn't anything that was super special. Not something that I would necessarily recommend. It was a middle-of-the-road book with a middle-of-the-road rating, so that's that one. Then I read Come Away With Me. This is by Kristen Proby. I decided to go back and read the first book in the series because I think I read book like 11 and 12 in that series months and months ago. So I decided to go back and read book 1. And this one follows a photographer and a movie star. And she runs into this movie star one day while she's walking around trying to take pictures, and he is definitely the type that doesn't really like the spotlight and the fame after something that happened in his past. So he thinks that this girl is trying to take pictures of him, but really she's just trying to take pictures of the scenery, and she kind of blows up on her, and they end up in this very interesting relationship where she doesn't even know who he is, doesn't know that he is a very famous, well-known movie star and producer, and it's just a very interesting relationship between the two of them. You know in the synopsis that she finds out who he is, like, middle of the book, and there's definitely some fallout from that, but it's just a really cute, really sweet romance story. It definitely has a lot of steamy scenes, so if you're not up for the steam, I would definitely not read this series. All of the books are like that. I would definitely say the downside of this series is they tend to fix a lot of their problems and do a lot of sex. Is that proper English? No. They do a lot of sexual fixing of their issues, which is not my favorite thing to do, but it was a fun book. It was a okay ride. I gave it a 4-star. It was just a really easy, fun romance read. If you're not looking for something that you're gonna very easily critique and knock down for points because it's not the best book you've ever read, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're just looking for a fun time, it's a good series to read. Okay, up next we have A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Kemmerer. This is the last and final book in the Cursebreaker series, the first one being A Curse of Dark and Lonely. It was originally starting off as a Beauty and the Beast retelling that follows Harper and Wren, is that his name? Harper and Wren, and she ends up like trying to save this other girl from being kidnapped from the human world, but she ends up getting kidnapped and taken to this fantasy land where she is tasked with trying to break the curse on Wren, who is the crowned prince at the time. And it definitely evolves from there. It's a much bigger, much more interesting story from there. I definitely say that the first book is the best book in the series. The second book follows a side character from the first book, and then the third book follows all of the characters coming back together for a very multi-perspective book. This one is not the best book in the series. I would definitely say that one definitely goes to book 1. I don't know if I liked book 3 better than book 2, but I definitely didn't mind the way that it wrapped up. I thought that it was wrapped up very nicely in a neat little bow. There wasn't a lot of stakes for me. It was a very fun read. It was very easy. It wasn't too crazy. I definitely think that Bridget Kemmerer is a really wonderful writer, and I will definitely read more from her in the future. But I wouldn't say this is my favorite fantasy series that I've ever read. If it would have gone in the same vein as the first one, it probably would have ended up being pretty highly ranked up there with some of the fantasy series that I've read. But after reading all 3 books, I would say that it's a kind of average retelling series. I liked it. It was good. I liked the characters. I liked the story arc. I know that we are getting some more books in this world following another side character, which I am quite excited for because I really like that particular side character. But yeah, I thought it was a very middle-of-the-road, fun fantasy novel. Would definitely recommend it if you haven't started the series already. I think that you could get a lot of fun out of it if you're just looking for a nice, fun series to read. But that's my thoughts on that. I ended up giving that one a 4-star. Alright, I promise you we're getting to the end. The next book that we have here is House Rules by Jodi Picoult. This is the second book that I read by the author. I ended up giving this book a 3-star. This one follows Jacob, who has Asperger's syndrome, and he's really focused on crime solving and forensic science. And when something happens to his tutor, he becomes the prime suspect in her case. And you're following the perspective of the mom, Jacob's brother, and Jacob's lawyer. And it was a very long book. It just felt overly long, and it was written as a thriller. So when you read, at least when I read thrillers, I like my thrillers to be really, condensed and not super long. This was a 500-page book, and so it's very drawn out. It was very theatrical. It spent a lot of time talking about, Asperger's and autism and families and individuals that live with autism and what it's like and the misconceptions and all of that stuff. But I was reading some reviews and said that this wasn't the best book in regards to being accurate, and it's not in own voices. Jodi Picoult is not somebody that lives with Asperger's, so it was, I don't know if it's the best book to read if you're looking for a book that really shows off the true experience. So anyways, that is a whole another spiel, but I just thought the book was too long. I didn't care for the ending. It was one of those endings that's very open-ended, and for a book that's 500 pages, I wanted more of an ending than what I got, unfortunately. The characters were okay. It was some frustrating at some times. It was very interesting and gripping in others. This one very much follows the actual trial that Jacob is on, which is very interesting as well. And again, I found that it was an interesting book. It just wasn't my favorite book, and I think that the pacing was just really a big hindrance of the reason why I didn't enjoy this book as much as I would have wanted to. So there's that one. Okay, the next book that I'm going to talk about is The Score. That is the third book in the Off-Campus series by Elle Kennedy. This one follows Dean and somebody else. Dean is definitely the fuckboy of the group. He is known for never being in a relationship, always just having sex with any girl that crosses his path, and it was a very cute and wonderful novel. It was so beautiful to see this very different, two very different people come together and have this very wonderfully dynamic, beautiful, just wonderful relationship. I believe that this one, the girl in this book is named Allie, and she is the best friend of the love interest from the first book in the Off-Campus series, Hannah, and Dean is roommates with Garrett. They're all roommates in this off-campus house at the Bribery University, and this one was very, very well done. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 5-star. I will definitely say that there's triggers for death of a friend in this one, so be aware of that one. There's also some trigger warnings for excess drug and alcohol use, so I will let you know that there is some of that in this book, so just beware. But I really enjoyed this book series as a whole. There are some trigger warnings in each and every book, so go into that with some knowledge. But overall, this series is fantastic, 100% recommend, and I do have to talk about 2 more books in this world in just a second, so stay tuned for that. Up next was the nonfiction book that I read this month, and that is What My Mother and I Don't Talk About. This was a collection of 15 authors that came together to talk about different stories and experiences of what them and their mothers didn't talk about, and it was a very interesting anthology nonfiction book. I definitely recommend it if you like something that's a little bit more hard-hitting, that is more family-oriented, where you get a lot of different perspectives of different families' engagement and experiences. I really enjoyed that. I will definitely say that some stories were better than others. Some stories were more connected than others. Some stories I really related with more than others, and I think that's pretty accurate in an anthology all around, especially a nonfiction anthology. But I did enjoy it. I gave it a 4-star. It was a very interesting nonfiction. This was an ARC copy that I had, so I didn't have the finished copy of this, so I don't know if anything was changed from the finished copy to the original copy, since I read it mostly through audiobook. But I definitely recommend it if you're looking for a good nonfiction anthology that has a little bit more hard-hitting qualities to it. The second to last book that we're going to talk about is the last book in the Off-Campus series by Elle Kennedy, and that is The Goal. This one follows 2 characters. It's the last roommate that lives in that off-campus house, and a female lawyer. Well, she's going into law school. I don't want to really divulge the dynamics of the relationship because it's a very big spoiler from book 3, so I would definitely recommend reading at least book 3 before you read book 4. But it was a very well put together book. I thought that these books were just so funny, so beautiful. The characters, the relationships, all of it was just so well done. I think I liked the 4th book in the series the most because it just felt the most realistic and raw and real, which I really, really enjoyed. It definitely hits on a topic of something that I'm very passionate about, so I thought that it was really well done. I would definitely recommend this series if you haven't already read it. I love Elle Kennedy's writing. She writes some very fantastic steamy scenes, but she really also writes really fantastic character development, really wonderful character arcs. All of these characters learn something in their experience with these relationships, and it's just so beautifully well done, so definitely recommend that one. And the last and final book that I'm going to talk about is another Elle Kennedy book, but that is actually the first book in the Bribery U series, which is a spin-off to the original Off-Campus series. And this one follows Summer, who is Dean from the 3rd book. It's Dean's sister, younger sister, Summer, and Fitz, who is one of the younger hockey players, and it's their relationship. And Fitz and Summer are very, very different. Summer is definitely the very stereotypical, rich, privileged, white girl. She has a lot of money, she has a lot of privilege, she's just coming off of a really interesting educational demotion, basically. She's coming from Brown University, where she had this fiasco that has brought her to the Bribery University campus, and Fitz is very much a quiet, doesn't like the spotlight, he's kind of geeky, he's into games and game programming, and they're just very, very different, but their relationship together was just so unbelievably cute. There's definitely some hate to love aspects in here. There's a lot of angst and sexual tension between these two characters. It's just so beautiful to watch and come together. It was so well done. I ended up giving this one a 4-star because I think that the character development was lacking a little bit in this one, and it was more based off of the plot, which I'm not used to for an Elle Kennedy book, so it just was a little bit of a lesser experience for me. But overall, I really enjoyed it. It was such a fun book. I love the series so much and definitely recommend it. If you haven't read any Elle Kennedy, I've gushed about her now for minutes and minutes and minutes. Definitely pick up both series. They're fantastic. I 100% recommend reading the off-campus series before you jump into Bribery U, but you don't have to. They technically stand as standalones, so you can do what you wish there. But that is the final book that I wanted to talk about today. I'm just going to quickly mention that my favorite book of the month was The Goal by Elle Kennedy, which is the last and final book in the off-campus series. It was just so well done, so beautiful. Definitely recommend it. I'm going to stop gushing about Elle Kennedy now. Let me know down below if you guys have read any of these books and what your thoughts are on any of them. I would love to know what you guys thought about these books down below. If you made it to the end, leave a leaf emoji because that's what I see in the background. And if you guys want to see my vlog coming very soon about my vacation here in Costa Rica, I will definitely stay tuned for that. I should be coming to you guys in about a week or so stay tuned for that. But that is the end of this video. I really, really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give it a big old thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave, and of course leave any comments, questions, and suggestions in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.